for the people who have a brain, no, the recession isn't over, and it's about to get worse for some. And not just worse, but much worse. As Tuesday's chaotic presidential debate shifted into a discussion about the U.S. economy, Fat Ass 45 and former Vice President Joe Biden seemed yet again to be operating in different stratospheres. As Fat Ass 45 boasted without corroborated evidence that our country is coming back incredibly well from the economic shutdown, which precipitated by the coronavirus pandemic, Biden countered that the recovery hasn't been so simple as Fat Ass 45 makes it out to be. Though some measures indicate revival, he argued the growth has primarily been concentrated in the stock market, where gains are made by people who have funds to invest. Millionaires and billionaires alike, like him in the middle of the COVID crisis, have done very well, Biden said, but you folks at home, you folks living in Scranton and Claymont and all the small towns and working class towns in America, how well are you doing? This exchange was largely drowned out by other arguments in the turbulent conversation, but Biden's rhetoric hit on a theme that economists have been warning about for months, that America's economic recovery from the coronavirus pandemic has been what they call K-shaped, or mainly it benefited the millionaires and billionaires, basically. American billionaires saw their wealth skyrocket by $282 billion between mid-March and mid-April, according to an analyst for the Institute for Policy Studies. Interest rates are down, allowing people who own their homes to refinance their mortgages. Those with jobs that provide 401ks have seen their account balances rise to near pre-pandemic levels. Even pandemic-fueled price changes have tended to reduce the prices of goods and services that mostly benefit people who have money to burn, like new cars, travel, and food delivery services have gotten cheaper. And then there's what's happening to millions of less fortunate Americans. During the same March to April time period that saw billionaires gain spike, more than 22 million Americans have lost their jobs. Those numbers have recovered somewhat, but the unemployment rate is still sitting at 8.4% in August, more than double the 3.5% it was before the pandemic hit. Um, 8 million more people are unemployed today than there were jobless in February. The same price shifts that made luxuries like food delivery cheaper have caused inexpensive grocery store items that poor houses rely on to become even more pricier. The pain shows little sign of abating for this unlucky group. In many ways, it's just getting worse. This week alone, Disney laid off 28,000 workers, and hundreds of thousands of airline workers could face a similar fate if Washington does not renew a federal assistance program that has been keeping an embattled industry afloat. Congress is still struggling to come to an agreement on the next coronavirus relief deal, even as several of the key programs serving as an economic lifeline have expired. One of the food assistance programs that was quickly rolled out to help children hit by the coronavirus-induced the economic crisis is slated to end in several states this week. Evictions, which have been temporarily paused for most people who have been financially affected by the virus, will kick off again in the dead of winter. This inequitable economic recovery can partially be blamed on congressional inaction, where bipartisan camaraderie behind emergency relief efforts ended soon after Congress overwhelmingly passed a $2.2 trillion relief package in March. The House Democrats subsequently had passed a $3 trillion package in May, which would have extended many of these programs, but the Senate Majority Leader Moscow Mitch refused to vote on it, dismissing it as a Democratic wish list. That's because he's a fucking asshole. The White House began negotiating with Democrats in July, but they have been unable to reach an agreement on another round of relief since. As frustration has mounted within the Democratic caucus and the pandemic continued to rage across the country, the Democratic leadership unveiled a pared-down proposal on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi continues to confer with the Treasury Secretary Steve white supremacist Mnuchin, but there is no guarantee in the agreement that pleases all parties involved all come to fruition this time. Either, Mnuchin had said Wednesday evening that the total cost was still too high. The House Democrats had expected to vote in the bill Wednesday evening, but they postponed the vote until Thursday to allow more room for further discussion, according to the Democratic aide, and any bill would need support from at least 13 different Republican senators and the White House's approval to actually become a full law. As negotiations lurched along this summer, programs that provided critical assistance have vanished with more expiration dates on the way. The payroll support program, which has been providing airlines with financial assistance to keep workers on payroll, ended October 1st. Airline executives have been warning for weeks that if no deal appears likely, hundreds of thousands of their workers, which includes baggage handlers, who earn a median income of about $28,000 per year, will be furloughed. 2 months ago, the federal pandemic unemployment compensation program stopped sending a weekly allotment of $600 to supplement the state unemployment benefits, and the Paycheck Protection Program, which administered millions of potentially forgivable loans to small businesses, closed on August 8th. Lobbyists on both sides of the aisle, particularly those advocating for industries hit hardest in the pandemic, are astounded their calls for help have fallen on mostly deaf ears. Congressional inaction is occurring when restaurants are literally at the weakest point they've been in 6 months, says Sean Kennedy, who's an executive vice president at the National Restaurant Association. With the weather getting colder and in much of the country, he argued restaurants need extra reinforcements at the federal level that will enable them to stay open and adhere to safety standards or otherwise risk permanent closure. It's amazing that restaurants suffering this much can't galvanize or secure relief when every time a member of Congress goes home to their district and they're shocked to learn another restaurant or favorite hangout has closed their doors for good. Michelle Evermore, who is a senior policy analyst at the National Employment Law Project, thinks that the inability to reach an agreement in Washington stems partially from the fact that the recovery has disproportionately benefited the wealthiest Americans, including those who serve in Congress and the people in their social circles. I think people who see numbers improving and they actually don't know anybody who's struggling. Evermore says that kind of people who serve in Congress don't tend to have a lot of broke friends. Time is also running out on the pandemic relief benefits that have kept children and low-income families from going hungry. The Pandemic EBT is a Department of Agriculture program that launched when schools closed to support the families of whose children would normally qualify for free and the reduced price school meals by loading funds onto a prepaid card otherwise used for food stamp benefits. It ended September 30th. Despite the fact that somewhere around half of the nation's public schools, students are still fully remote. A few states have recently been authorized to continue the program on a more limited basis. The summer food service program, also funded by the USDA, enabled kids and families of all income brackets to obtain free meals distributed by schools throughout their closure. It will lose funding in January of next year. Healthcare practitioners have already been seeing the impact of families scrambling to make ends meet on their children's health. What I see every single day from the pandemic is really amazingly increased numbers of severely underweight children coming to the clinic, and parents really panicked about how they're going to find enough food to feed the children. Dr. Megan Sando, co-director of the Grow Clinic for Children at Boston Medical Center, and the lead investigator of Children's Health Watch, said on a recent press call. Housing experts also fear that what is to come in January when the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention eviction moratorium ends. At that point, renters who have so far avoided eviction because of eviction protections will owe months' worth of back rent in addition to any late fees that their leases stipulated. It is not yet known how many people may suddenly lose their homes during one of the coldest months of the year, but unless some form of rent relief or direct payment is passed, that figure will surely be staggering. With all of this unraveling under his watch, Fat Ass 45 still claimed during Tuesday's debate that he had built the greatest economy in history, which before the pandemic struck. No, he didn't. If only examining the gains made by people who share Fat Ass 45's billionaire status, that might be right, but still no. But even before the COVID-19 sent the economy into a tailspin, many income Americans probably would disagree. In 2018, nearly 40% of Americans couldn't cover an unplanned $400 expense without going into debt, carrying a balance on their credit card, or borrowing any funds, according to a report from the Federal Reserve. Around the same time, 3 men in the U.S. collectively held more wealth than the poorest half of Americans, according to an Institute for Policy Studies report. For some, the looming loss of housing and food protections, in addition to the lack of second of a second stimulus check and the standstill in Congress over extending protections for payroll relief, it's only going to make things harder, and it's also going to get worse as ever more. It, what's worse said ever more is that few people in power seem to give a shit. Um, goodwill toward people who lost work through no fault of their own has dissipated faster during this recession, she says, than any time in history. Yeah, no, that's what's worse about this. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, Ryan Van Mike, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.